Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Opogo webinar. I'm really delighted today to be joined by Clare Williams from Hamish and Milo. And I know Clare's going to explain about the work that Hamish and Milo do. It's something that we had a quick chat before we started recording that is benefiting a lot of schools, not just in a qualitative sense, but also a quantitative sense. And Claire, I'm sure, will explain that to us. But a lot of Claire's work is centered around well-being and really promoting SEMH throughout the curriculum. And really, there's nothing more important that schools can offer than making children feel safe. I'm sure nobody would really disagree with that. So Claire was put in touch with us by Dr. Louise Egan. And Louise put us in contact. Louise has shared numerous webinars about her work, particularly around trauma-informed practice. So without further ado, I will hand over to Claire. If you do have any questions, if you're watching this live, you can drop them in the Q&A box. If you aren't watching it live, you'll be able to get Claire's contact details. Hamish and Milo are working with schools all over the country. So those contact details will be available at the end too. So please do look them up, and either if you're a school leader watching this, get in contact. And if you are a teacher, an educator, then have a look at it and encourage the people that you work with to have a look at it as well. And hopefully it can be something that not only benefits you engaging in this webinar now, but also can benefit the children that you're working with within the school settings that you are. Okay, Claire, very warm welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. My background really is as a primary teacher. That's where I started, in sort of the London borough of Newham in East London. And I think very quickly I began to work with children with social, emotional, mental health difficulties, and began to really look at how to support children in whole school settings, and really to develop the work of understanding what's underneath behaviour. I trained as an educational psychotherapist as well. So I think, the reason I'm kind of highlighting that is that this was very much about the synergy of how we really put that therapeutic practice into school settings. So I've worked for a while within CAMS and obviously mostly in schools. And I really do believe that it's school that's where the work happens. I'm a trauma-informed schools trainer, one of the senior team. And so I'm involved in running trauma-informed diplomas and really looking at that kind of trajectory for children and their mental health, where they've experienced adversity, and really supporting schools to understand again that kind of layer of behaviour. So where I sit with Hamish and Milo is an intervention. It's based around social and emotional mental health. It sits alongside PSHE, but really is about how do we address and support children's social emotional needs. How do we give them the skills for life and learning? And that's kind of the context of where I'm sat with this today. And I think one of the other key things that's so relevant is that my work also was involved very much in alternative provision, but looking at children still in mainstream settings that were at risk of exclusion, that had been excluded, that needed a kind of much more nurture-based curriculum, but also still needed access within the mainstream, within their whole school setting. So I'm going to share a screen in a moment and just take you through a brief PowerPoint, because the kind of focus of today is very much about the culture of well-being. How do we really set that and that kind of psychological safety and ethos around emotional health and well-being through a whole school setting? But then absolutely, how do we ensure that those children that have a greater level of need, or a need for further enhancement around social and emotional mental health needs, receive the relevant and the right support for that? So bear with me while I share my screen, guys, and I hope that this will become clearer. So I think this is very much then about that sense of culture, as I've already said. It's about how we really support children in a learning context when they might be struggling with their social and emotional development, their mental health. How do we also support children to express, to be able to understand and regulate their feelings in order to manage that learning environment? And really, how do we equip the adults and the pastoral staff as well within a whole school context to really support those children, and also to recognise that, you know, the wider services are so stretched actually, and it's so important that we recognise the value and the significance of the work that schools are doing on a day-by-day basis. So if we just take the thought of that context, really, that, you know, the landscape for schools at the moment, it's frightening, isn't it? You know, the statistics are only increasing. 1 in 6 children with a mental health difficulty, with a diagnosis, and those are just the ones that are presenting. And actually, we know that those numbers are higher. We see this in earlier cases, so children with in the early years. And we also know that almost over half actually of mental ill health is prevalent before the age of 14. So actually, this is really relevant, particularly for primary settings, to really look at what are the foundations we're putting in place in terms of curriculum, in terms of ethos, in terms of the way in which we work in whole classes, but also in intervention in order to support young children. We absolutely know that there are thousands of children across the UK waiting for access to mental health services, for CAMHS. And, you know, some of my work was working in CAMHS, and there is such great work that goes on there, but actually the levels of need still aren't being met by the huge waiting lists. And I'm hearing more and more that children are waiting 24 months, 2 years in very many counties across the UK to receive sort of CBT approaches or opportunities to have therapeutic intervention. And actually, you know, that's way too long. And I think actually the real value is the recognition that schools have an absolutely vital role in this and are very much the front line actually. And we can sometimes feel overwhelmed with that because, you know, it feels like we weren't trained as therapists, we were trained as teachers, we were trained as educators. But actually this is about the whole child. And if we can enable children to feel safe enough and secure enough and feel that they're being supported emotionally and to be able to regulate that emotional experience, then we're going to get them to engage and we're going to get them to learn. And so it very much is actually a part of how we support children's learning and their capacity to engage in the curriculum. I think the other key here for me, and this is very relevant for the work that I've always done, is that, you know, SEMH is very highly directly related to children at risk of exclusions, of suspensions, and those statistics are desperate really for some of those children because of not having been able to have the right level of support in order to get their social, emotional, mental health needs met, to be able to manage and to be able to be held safely and securely within schools. But look at that statistic, 15 times more likely to be permanently excluded and 13.5 times more likely to be suspended than children without SEN needs. So we know that this is a vital area, and it's persistent behaviour difficulties that are the key indicator towards a child going through that trajectory. So we have to do some things differently. We have to be able to turn the focus around from the data around maths, literacy, science, and being able to think about, yes, that's vitally important, but actually we need to get children ready to learn. We need to enable children to feel safe enough and psychologically secure enough with the adults who are there to support their learning journey and achieve their potential. So I think this is very, very much about how we do create that culture of well-being. You know, as I just said already, that the schools are absolutely in the front line. They have a role really in loco parentis, actually, of kind of connecting with young people, receiving them into educational settings and enabling them to feel safe enough, to feel listened to feel understood, and to feel able to know that adults around them are safe enough for them to trust in order to be able to manage in an educational setting. More and more children are coming in with lots of heightened stresses, you know, from home, from learning expectation, from fear of failure. And that's enough to really make anyone go into their fight, flight, freeze response system. So we need to really have an understanding about how we engage with young people at a relational level to enable them to feel able to come towards rather than to retreat and to fight or to even flee. So this quote really comes from the government green paper, Transforming Children and Young People's Mental Health. And I think that one of the critical factors here in this report is that it highlights that there is huge and growing evidence actually that appropriate supported staff in schools, so this isn't just the work of therapeutic services such as CAMHS, this is actually the work of teaching assistants, counsellors, ELSAs, adults that are working alongside children in a social emotional capacity. We absolutely know from the research that with the right support, with the right training, and with the right programs to be able to offer a framework that targets social and emotional development, we absolutely know that we can engage more children in learning. So it's really vital that we really enhance this opportunity to think about, actually, we have staff in schools that are really, really skilled and with additional support and training and the right programs in place can actually do the work of trained therapists. So that is the research. So it's hugely important to recognize the importance of schools' role within this. And I think this is a very helpful document, really, the Public Health England report, which really looks at the way in which we can promote children and young people's emotional health and well-being. But absolutely, it has to be as a whole school approach. We can't just take that kind of like layer of children that are struggling and work that in a silo. What we absolutely need is a leadership and management team that kind of walk the talk, that really ensure that staff well-being as well as the provision for young people is prioritized, that there is a clear vision, that there is a real centralized awareness and informed approaches about what the current kind of landscape of mental health is, how this is impacting on our young people, and how we can meet those needs in order to ensure that we reach the data requirements and the expectations and the achievements targets that we have, obviously. This is also about the ethos. This is very much about how we really do promote those values of respect, those values of diversity, how we celebrate our communities, and also how it feels when we kind of walk into a school. Do you know, I visit so many schools, and it's in the first couple of moments that you're in the sense of that school, and whether it or not it feels welcoming, whether it feels psychologically safe, whether it feels friendly. And as a visitor, if you feel that, then it's absolutely true that the children will feel it too. And so we absolutely know too that it is through relationships and how we model this, how there is visible kindness that's demonstrated, peer to peer, but also through adults to their peer colleagues, and obviously through systems, through the children and the relationships with children too. And looking at kind of schools and ethos where there is a kind of sense of empowerment of all and collaboration, and looking at real supporting relationships so that children feel secure and safe, and not a kind of driven power over ethos, which is very much more driven like by a heightened stress. And what we also know about that is how that then heightens stress responses in our young people. It's also about having curriculum, sort of quality first teaching, but also the kind of the taught as well as the court curriculum. Again, this is through the ethos. It's through the way in which the adults engage with the young people. It's also about the values, the ethos, the ways in which those kind of core values are kind of almost transferred through osmosis to the young people, but also that there is a rigorous taught curriculum that looks at social and emotional skills and goes into actually some of the deeper learning of that. It's also then about student voice. It's really about how we enable the student voice to really feel heard and listened to. I was kind of involved in some training recently where someone was really talking through a virtual school perspective, actually, for looked after children, and saying that actually sometimes we're only asking the questions that we want the answers to. And actually, how true is that? How often do we really sit alongside young people and actually really, really listen to understand their perspective, rather than coming with a kind of already felt perspective or a judgment, really? really that we're just trying to prove our kind of hypothesis. We really need to understand how to sit alongside and listen. I think because, you know, within education, we're kind of primed to ask questions rather than sometimes to really listen to the experience of our young people. So how do we really do that through our culture and our ethos and our provision? Staff development, I think, is absolutely vital, because we need to really start with the adults to create a real sense of self-awareness of the adults. How are they managing their own stress response systems, and how are they managing their own well-being? You know, we really do have a kind of society at the moment where we are under so much stress, and teachers and educators and TAs and support staff are all kind of suffering from that kind of levels of adversity and austerity that we've been through and are still sadly within. And I think, you know, we really do have to look at what's put in place to develop real collegial support, develop opportunities for CPD, and obviously as well having formal and informal mechanisms in place for support, for staff forums, for supervision. That kind of support as well is vital. So identifying need and monitoring impact of interventions is critical too. And this very much is about really looking at what is the real need of our young people. Do we really understand what the underlying situations are for children, and how do we monitor to show real depth of impact that's then going to be transferable skills back into the classroom? We also know it's vitally important to work with parents and carers. And I think this is where we can really start to think outside the box. I think very often there's been still a divide between what's happening at home and what's happening at schools. And I think, you know, where we can really bring the community in, where we can foster that real working relationship, that collaborative response and awareness, and really build those relationships, we can kind of start to shift the trajectory of intergenerational trauma and kind of repeated patterns, because again, you know, we see that so often in our schools. And I think the last one there is what I'm going to come on to in a moment, is really about targeted support. So really looking at how do we ensure that the right social emotional programs are meeting the needs of children where they are at, and looking to enable those deficits or actually to enhance their social and emotional learning curriculum. So each of these key areas is huge. And I think this is, for me, the actual kind of premise of the whole thing, really, that it's about the quality of relationships that's the most powerful element that makes the difference to children's well-being. And you know, this is very much conducted through, as I've already highlighted, you know, the ethos, the values, but this is very much about the fact that it is the adults that set the emotional tone. They set the strategy, the vision, the priorities. And this is again about how we might have a charter of well-being, policies that value relationships, connection, and the whole well-being of the whole community. So this includes parents and carers alongside the staff and the young people. And about, as I've already said, really prioritizing those staff, because actually we need to start with the adults present in the lives of children to ensure that then those adults are emotionally well enough and self-aware enough to be able to not be triggered, to be able to respond in a way that's safe and in a way that maximizes outcomes for children too, and regulates behaviors that could be sometimes challenging. This is also, for me, about belonging. And we talk a lot in the work that we do about Dan Hughes's work, and many of you may know of him and his vital work around PACE, which is playfulness and acceptance and curiosity and empathy. But actually some of the key elements of this is about how we create a real sense of belonging, a real sense of family, a real sense of trust, care, and what we keep terming as emotional safety, because it's kind of how you feel within. You know, even if you're reassured that it's a safe, secure place, children don't necessarily feel that if they feel triggered or worried about learning or worried about other situations that might be happening for them. So this is about making those connections, creating a sense of nurture, as well as really strengthening those relationships. And it's also about, you know, the physical safety of an environment, but also about that kind of felt sense of welcomingness, the sensory experiences, if it's bright, vibrant, interesting, and you know, the creativity as well, because I think sometimes we've gone a little bit away from creativity in education. And you know, the other key for me is, where's the joy as well in education? I think we've gone down a road where, you know, it's really hard to find joy and fun and kind of relaxed playfulness in schools. But belonging is absolutely critical for mental health, and this is set in the culture of schools. It's also about that sense of really feeling heard and understood, as I highlighted just now. So how do we create opportunities that really allow children to be listened to, but also the staff too, so that they don't feel judged? And also, how can we challenge to really ensure that we are listening from the perspective of those young people, rather than, you know, sometimes just a kind of a thought or a theory around children's experience. This is also about sense of agency. How do we empower that collaborative working, and also that then leads towards an inclusive educational experience? So it's openness, it's honesty, and also about, really, as I've already said, opportunities to feel properly listened to. And the final one for me is about value. It's about feeling recognised. How do we create this for our staff, for our children, so that we really empower a sense of self-worth, a sense of purpose, and real celebration, and, you know, really recognizing the achievements of everyone? Because I think sometimes we're still stuck in a sense of that, you know, moving on to the next thing. And, you know, we've got to sometimes sit and pause and think about the achievements, the aspirations, and have opportunities for reflection. So within this kind of approach, again, we very much see how, you know, a universal provision you know, sets the kind of bar around how we do provide critical enhanced PSHE for young people. You know, PSHE is one of those things that, until it was made statutory, was something that could very often get squeezed out of the curriculum. And sadly, I still think it does sometimes. But I think, you know, I think every single child needs that experience of enhanced PSHE, more than PSHE, around that mental health strand. We kind of need to think about the social and emotional skills, and how are we really equipping children with the skills for life, as well as learning. So we need adults that are able to be empathic and responsive in order to create this opportunity for learning. With targeted intervention, I think it's vital that we recognise that there are children that have gaps in that learning experience and need greater levels of intervention, clear, graduated, evidence-based programmes and resources, and key adults that have those additional skills around, you know, being able to engage with young people that have sometimes felt that sense of failure, but also working alongside parents and family partnerships, and using nurture principles as well, really engaging those young people to have their emotional needs met in order to be able to learn, to be able to access their cognitive thinking, rather than being in their fight, flight, freeze responses systems. And of course, we also have to recognise that there is the need to refer on sometimes. And, you know, I think there is a danger sometimes that we hold children and say, actually, they need CAMS. Well, you know, the waiting list, as we've already heard, is around 12 to 24 months. So actually, in that time, we still have a huge opportunity, and the research that says actually relational intervention, as well as really clear, targeted programs, give that opportunity to do much of that work. But we still have to work in a multi-agency capacity to ensure that children's needs are really met. So an example of this is our Hamish and Milo. And I'm not to say, you know, not to say that there aren't other things out there, because of course there is a range around this area. But actually, why I'm highlighting Hamish and Milo, obviously, is because what I really believe is that this offers a range of kind of core emotional themes. So 10 themes around conflict resolution, which is actions, words, and me. That's the kind of the first one, that magenta color, through to diversity. And that one's celebrating me, really looking about what it feels like when I feel different, when I don't feel I fit in. The blue one is resilient me. So really looking at how do we really empower children to reach for the goals that they want to achieve, but also to have the support mechanisms, to have those that inspire, that enable them to develop those skills of perseverance and teamwork skills and problem solving to be able to reach towards their aspiration. Calm me is the kind of teal colour, and that one is around anxiety. So really thinking about those children that are coming to school with emotional based school avoidance. You know, we're seeing heightened levels of self-harm, high levels of anxiety in young people, you know, and I think this is as a result of the pandemic, but actually this was prior. We're just seeing a kind of another kind of layer of that now. But again, we need to look at cognitive approaches. We also need to look at kind of helping children understand what's happening in their brains and bodies when they're feeling anxious, so that they can start to put language around those experiences, enabling them to learn how to regulate and also to be able to accept regulation from another. And that's critical within this program. The kind of blue one is called Finding Me. It's about sadness. And I think, again, it's about how do we support children with grief or pain or sad feelings. We sometimes jolly them out of it, but actually it's vital that we really sometimes allow children to be sad and know what to say, because sometimes even adults don't know what to say when children are sad. We kind of find that hard to bear ourselves. The green one is called New Beginnings in Me, and this one is very much about change, transition, and the fears and the uncertainty around that. But actually we can plan for some change, but some change is unwanted. Some change is kind of, unexpected as well. So how do we manage those feelings of fear, those feelings of anticipation, uncertainty, loss around that as well? And how do we equip children with the skills to be able to close and have endings in order to reach for new beginnings? So again, huge layers of work around the psychoeducation of all of this, which I think is why this sits alongside PSHE, but goes to a deeper level. The light green one is called Memories and Me, and this one focuses on loss, again, bereavement, and how we kind of survive through that, how we come to a place of beginning to heal through loss. The orange one is Amazing Me. This is self-esteem, really, again, looking at how do we empower children to have a sense of them, of who they are, and have a sense of their own strengths and their inner narrative around their self-worth and the fact that they matter. Friendships, this pinky coloured one is My Friends and Me, and this focuses of course on friendships, but also when my friend betrays me, when my friend hurts me, when my friend pressurizes me, all of those uncomfortable feelings, as well as the kind of qualities of friendships and how to maintain healthy relationships. So how do we equip children with the skills, the language, the scripts of knowing how to develop those communication skills within relationships and friendships? And finally, Exploding Me is around anger, strong feelings, how we express anger. Most children feel mad or bad if they've got angry feelings, or they have anger management, and it drives me mad, because actually we all need angry feelings, and it's important children have permission for that, and also the skills to recognize the triggers, permission to feel angry, to recognize it's their kind of inner guard dog that's saying actually something doesn't feel right, but then learn healthy ways to expel that safely. So this is our whole resource. And what this really does is look at, thinking about that Public Health England wheel, really. It really does allow us to just dig into where those children are, to really help think about what's their experience. How do we listen to really understand them? We use sock puppets very much through the whole resource. I've got one right here. And this really is a way that enables children to have that distance. It's a real therapeutic tool to help them talk about experiences, feelings that kind of give that level of safety, but also give them opportunity to share perhaps what they might not have felt safe enough to do beforehand. So of course this is about having really clear safeguarding in place, but it's vital that we start to find ways to equip children with that opportunity to share their experiences, and this is a really critical way. This is one story that we have of a school that's working with Hamish and Milo, and the kind of core Ofsted requirements around targeted intervention is again something we need to hold in mind and be mindful of. And the intent of it is really about trying to offer a range of intervention programs. Those key programs I've just described are 10-week programs in their own right. Each one is a 10-week program. So it really is about aligning with what is the need and how do we fit this as a core priority within our school development plan, but then also equipping staff with the right training, the right resources to give effective intervention. So how do we implement it? We really need to map where children are at. We need to establish small groups or one-to-one work based on that identified need, and thinking about also group dynamics and also emotional stage rather than just chronological age. We need to really look at what's relevant and how we tailor and differentiate to ensure that needs are met. And again, how we support staff in delivery is absolutely huge. And Hamish and Milo works really hard to ensure that the staff don't feel alone with this intervention, and making sure that children feel safe and their anxieties is heard, is one of those quotes there. And this is about impact. This is really about also having clear measurement profiles in place, really looking at pre and post scores around emotional presentation of behaviours, and then the protective factors alongside that. And we use a really clear profiling system for that. And we're really looking at then how do we signpost on where need be, or how do we see the impact then transferred back into the classroom. You know, I've already highlighted this. We use wellbeing profiles, which give an understanding around what the presenting behaviour might be, even the behaviours that we might sometimes misconstrue. Actually, sometimes angry behaviour can be misread because actually there's an anxiety there, or there's a fear there, or there's a depth of sadness there. So it really helps us to kind of have the sort of secure language and a shared understanding about what that presenting behaviour is, and then to really look at descriptors around what that behavior might look like, how we might see shifts and changes, and then really looking at a graduated response and how we really deliver qualitative intervention to counteract that trajectory that children are on very often. And again, this feeds into EHCPs, SEN reviews, and is a vital part of our work in schools, because we need to demonstrate impact. And of course, measuring social and emotional mental health is not easy, because again, it can vary on day to day as well, based on, you know, triggers or emotional experiences, or what's happening in that present day, or any triggers that have happened at home or even at school. We have a developmental dashboard now. It's called Navigator, that we are about to launch, which also really allows schools to be able to dig in deeper to each group and to look at the interventions and which children are doing which interventions, because they might do only one in their whole school career, they might do 2 or 3. It might really sit alongside the PSHE, but absolutely there is real flexibility within this resource. And again, what we're looking at too is not just the group dynamic in terms of shifts and changes in terms of their social and emotional development, but also individual children. So let's really look at what's the difference for children, and also what's the context for those children. So are they looked after children, and, you know, are they children at risk of exclusion, or are they children that absolutely need that bolstering around self-esteem in order to be able to translate that and engage more in their learning? And we are hearing wonderful stories about these skills being transferred, and even children coming to school just on days when they're doing Hamish and Milo, those ones that have kind of got emotional based school avoidance. And we are starting to see that too in our dashboards and in the presenting data that we've got now. I've highlighted this already a lot, and I think this is again vital as part of that Public Health England and creating that whole culture, because we can't work with children in a way that vitally supports their emotional development if we don't have staff whose wellbeing is prioritised. You know, this is about thinking about staff wellbeing policies, having frameworks around supervision, and really safeguarding that mental health, so that there is a real non-blame and a culture of collegial support for staff. This is very much about how we really support the adults to feel supported themselves, how they feel able to listen and not be triggered by some of the stories that young people bring, and also us thinking about offering enhanced training, so that they have a depth of understanding around social and emotional need, mental health, and again are more informed then to be able to work more deeply with the young people. It's also about, as I've said already, having the right programs, because I think very often teachers or TAs or ELSAs have a level of training, and then they're kind of left to kind of scrabble around to download things off the internet, which sometimes are great, but actually there isn't always a format or a framework. And what we want to offer with Hamish and Milo is a real clarity of structure, of content, really showing progression around that emotional theme, so that what we've got is really detailed session plans, but they are accessible, practical and user-friendly, and also, you know, are flexible too. I think that's really important, because you need to be able to then use your own professional awareness to be able to do this work well. And of course, I keep talking about reflection and supervision, and we will offer that alongside Hamish and Milo in terms of those staff who are very often working with some of the most challenging behaviours and children that really are struggling, and actually without support they're either going to burn out themselves or become ill or even leave. You know, I think think that we really do need to make sure that those layers are in place. And again, you know, we have a special school working with Hamish and Milo, and this is all the way from primary all the way up to Key Stage 3 and 4 in a special provision. And again, this is about the intent here of setting an enhanced PSHE curriculum within this one-to-one setting very often within this school, being a special school. And we have other schools that have got children that have ASC with or even non-verbal up into Key Stage 3 using this. And again, really looking at how we support staff, how we build partnership with parents in terms of the implementation of the programme, and really look at the emotional stages of development as well in our implementation plan. And again, looking at the impact for how this sits alongside PSHE, how children are faring in terms of even slight changes really very often can show huge then kind of more longer term impact as well for children, and really enabling us to have opportunity for observation, for reflection, for being able to notice even very slight changes in behaviours that have a deeper impact longer term. Parent partnership, I'm nearly there, guys, but parent partnership, as I've already said, is huge. We have leaflets within Hamish and Milo which really try to speak to the adults at home, not in a way that's condescending. I think too often we think that, you know, we are obviously the educators, we have a lot of experience, but wow, so do parents and carers, and we need to really tap into that and enable parents to feel empowered to open that dialogue and not feel under threat or feel, you know, talked down to. We have to really work in partnership to help them understand what are we doing, how are we framing this work, how can they support at home, what the conversations they might be able to have with children that support children's experience to be able to share what's happening for them, and really again giving them confidence to use some of those ideas at home. So this is very much a part of the work, and inviting parents in as well to be able to hear, to see, to become part of some of those sessions. And we are working on a kind of family layer to this so that it supports a kind of family Hamish and Milo program alongside the intervention, the targeted intervention. So that very much in a nutshell is the kind of whole resource, but also I think what I've really tried to highlight is how this sits within a culture, how this sits alongside the whole PSHE curriculum, because it is absolutely vital that we don't do this work without that kind of framework wrapped around it. So a massive thank you. I do think I've gone at breakneck speed and sometimes can talk a little bit fast. So I hope it's been clear and hopefully informative as well. And I can see that perhaps there are some questions. So thanks very much for listening, guys.
Oh yeah, great. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, there was a couple of questions during that I was able to answer that were around, you know, getting the slides and things like that. So you'll be able to view them on there. And what's been the response from parents to this when you've held a program in the schools?
So I think that's a kind of exciting layer, actually. I think we, you know, have schools where we've had parents coming in and saying, actually, their children are starting to talk about things more at home. We've had parents coming in and saying that they're not struggling to get their children into school on Hamish and Milo days. I mean, for us, that's absolutely huge. We've had children being able to talk to their parents about some of the strategies that they're using as a result of Hamish and Milo. So I think we've actually had very, very positive reviews and feedback so far. And I think what we're trying to do really is encourage that dialogue as much as we can, so that we're inviting parents in to come and share some of the work that the children are doing. At the end as well, children are able to take home their sock puppet. We have wellbeing journals as part of the resource as well, so that the parents kind of feel involved as well. But also I think those leaflets are very kind of non-confrontational. They're just not trying to say, oh, your child has a difficulty, but they're trying to say, actually, we all, you know, have these areas of emotional developmental needs. Sometimes we all have difficulties with friendship. So how can, this is what we're doing in school to support children more with this. So it is about opening that dialogue, and we have had very positive feedback so far from parents.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And what are the big plans then with Hamish and Milo? What are you looking to achieve in the next sort of 6 months, 12 months? I know life's very unpredictable, but what would you like to achieve with Hamish and Milo?
Okay, so that's a great question. You know, we are actually working with the University of Bath at the moment with a research study, and we've been going for, you know, just about 8 months already. And we're working with around 80 schools already in different parts of the country, just within this research. And then we've got more schools that are just doing the program. But the University of Bath are really looking at measuring the impact so we can see it as an evidence base. We are very much using our wellbeing profiles, and we are at the moment, the early indicators are that there is significant shifts from children at the outset to the end of a program. So we really are seeing promising results around this. So I think for me, our biggest aim is to work with more cohorts of schools. We're working with multi-academy trusts, we're working with individual schools. You know, we really are trying to build a community so that schools feel supported, that we're able to offer training, supervision, and kind of network meetings half-termly. So I think for me, it's really about now gathering more cohorts of schools, building those networks, and empowering staff to feel confident in working with children that perhaps show greater levels of social and emotional need. And my biggest aim is really for children to feel happy, heard, and connected. And I think if we can do that, especially in the climate that we've currently got, then, you know, it will be very exciting to see the difference we're making. But we're very much looking forward to the outcomes and the ongoing research that we're working with the University of Bath and the psychology department.
Great. Thanks, Claire. What a wonderful way to finish. What were the 3 key words that you said then at the end there, that it's like sort of your motto?
So our motto is for children to feel happier, heard, and connected. So it's very much that as our kind of core approach.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Well, the work you're doing is fantastic, and it's so needed. And sometimes you read a lot of things in the media or social media about education, but things like Hamish and Milo and the work that you're doing with schools is brilliant. So I hope people will get in contact with Claire via this site, and we'll certainly keep in touch from a Opogo point of view. So that's brilliant. So thanks so much for your time, Claire. Really interesting. Very insightful approach, and I think the way that you are producing something real at the end of it's really important, so that schools can see the changes that the children are making, both anecdotally and through the evidence that you collect as well. And good luck with everything with the University of Bath as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
amazing.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.